I'm 86 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me most of my life to fully understand. The food you eat is not just fuel, it is information. And some of that information is actively telling your body to break down, inflame, and age faster than it was ever designed to. Most people think about food in terms of calories. They count them, cut them, balance them, and then wonder why they still feel exhausted at 50, why their joints ache, why their mind gets foggy after lunch, why the doctor keeps adding medications to the list every year. They think disease arrives suddenly, like a storm that came out of nowhere. But it doesn't. Disease is built slowly, meal by meal, over decades. And the 5 categories of food I'm about to walk you through, the ones I made a decision never to touch, are the ones doing the most building, most quietly, most consistently, in the bodies of people who still believe they are eating reasonably. Let's start at the surface with what most people believe. Most people believe that if something is sold in a store, approved by a government agency, labeled as a food, it must be safe to eat. That logic feels reasonable. It is also, in a very quiet and devastating way, wrong. The food industry is not in the business of keeping you healthy. It is in the business of keeping you eating. And those two objectives, I promise you, are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. One is about your longevity, the other is about their profit margin. The first category I never touched was seed oils, not because someone told me they were bad, because when I looked at what they were, truly looked at the process that created them, I couldn't reconcile them with the idea of eating something natural. Canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, cottonseed oil, vegetable oil, and all its many branded forms. These are not foods that existed in any form before the 20th century. They are products of industrial chemistry. To extract oil from a soybean or a corn kernel, you need chemical solvents. You need high heat. You need bleaching. You need deodorization, because the oil that comes out of that process smells rancid, because it already is rancid, oxidized during extraction before it ever reaches the bottle. Then it gets labeled and sold as a heart-healthy cooking oil, and we accept that because it says so on the package. But it goes deeper than that. The real issue with seed oils isn't just that they're processed. It's what they do once they're inside you. These oils are extraordinarily high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Your body needs some omega-6. The problem is the ratio. For most of human history, people ate omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. Today, the average person consuming a modern Western diet takes them in at a ratio closer to 20-to-1, sometimes 30-to-1. That imbalance is not a minor nutritional footnote. It is a systemic driver of chronic inflammation throughout the entire body, and chronic inflammation is the underlying mechanism behind heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, arthritis, autoimmune disorders, nearly every major disease that is killing people in the modern world. The fire that burns everything down is burning slowly for years, and seed oils are one of the primary fuels. And here's what most people miss. Seed oils are not just in your cabinet, they are hiding in almost everything processed. They're in the crackers, the salad dressings, the restaurant food, the bread, the sauces, the frozen meals, the chips, the cookies, the protein bars. If you eat packaged food of any kind with any regularity, you are consuming these oils in quantities your body was never designed to handle, and you are doing it constantly without knowing it. The second category is refined sugar. And I want to be precise here because this goes much deeper than sugar is bad for you. Everyone knows that at some level. What most people don't understand is the mechanism, like the actual biological cascade that happens every time refined sugar enters your body. When you consume refined sugar, particularly fructose, it goes directly to the liver. Your liver doesn't need it for energy in the way your muscles might. It doesn't have a ready place to put it. So it converts it to fat. Not fat that gets burned for fuel, fat that gets stored. And over time, that fat accumulates in the liver itself, leading to a condition that barely existed 50 years ago, but now affects a full third of adults in the developed world. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Most of the people walking around with it have no idea. There are no symptoms in the early stages. The damage is invisible until it isn't. But the real power of this issue isn't even in the liver. It's in what sugar does to insulin over time. Every time you consume refined sugar, your blood glucose spikes and your pancreas releases insulin to bring it back down. Do this repeatedly for years, for decades, and your cells begin to stop listening to insulin. They become resistant. They downregulate the receptors. And insulin resistance is not just the precursor to type 2 diabetes. It is the precursor to almost every metabolic disease there is. It drives high blood pressure. It drives abdominal fat accumulation. It drives cognitive decline. There is serious research now calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because of how profoundly insulin resistance in the brain affects its ability to use glucose for energy. The connection between the donut you eat at breakfast and the dementia you may develop 30 years later is not abstract. It is biochemical, it is measurable, and it is real. The real meaning here is this: refined sugar is not a treat with mild consequences if overused. It is a metabolic disruptor that, consumed at the levels most people consume it today, progressively dismantles the body's regulatory systems from the inside out, decade by quiet decade. The third category is processed grains. And this is where I tend to lose people because grains feel ancient, feel traditional, feel safe, and whole grains, in their intact form, are a different conversation. I'm talking about what happens when you take a grain, strip away its fiber and its germ and its bran and its minerals and its vitamins, grind it into a fine white powder, and then sell it as food. What you are left with is essentially sugar with a different texture. White bread, white pasta, most commercial cereals, most crackers, most baked goods, they metabolize in your body at a speed that floods the bloodstream with glucose far faster than any natural whole food would. Your pancreas was not designed to handle that speed, continuously, multiple times a day, for a lifetime. But it goes even deeper than that. Modern wheat is not the wheat your great-grandparents ate. Through decades of selective hybridization aimed at higher yield and pest resistance, modern wheat produces significantly higher levels of a protein called gliadin, a component of gluten. Gliadin has been shown in research to trigger the release of a compound called zonulin in the gut lining. Zonulin causes the tight junctions of the intestinal wall to loosen. When those junctions open, even slightly, even in people who are not celiac and do not feel sick, particles that have no business leaving the digestive system enter the bloodstream. The immune system encounters them and mounts a response. That response is inflammation. And that inflammation is systemic, chronic, and connected to an extraordinary range of conditions that modern medicine continues to treat as separate diseases with separate drugs, when in many cases they are the same fire burning in different rooms. The fourth category is processed meat. I want to be careful here because this is not a condemnation of meat itself. Meat has been a central part of human diets for hundreds of thousands of years, and there is nothing inherently wrong with it. What I'm talking about is what modern food processing does to meat before it reaches you. Hot dogs, deli meats, sausages, commercially made bacon, cured meats of all kinds. These products are treated with sodium nitrite as a preservative and a color stabilizer. Sodium nitrite, when exposed to the high heat of cooking or to the acidic environment of the human stomach, reacts to form compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are among the most consistently identified carcinogens in food science. The World Health Organization classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as tobacco smoke and asbestos, not similar in magnitude of risk, similar in the certainty and quality of the evidence establishing the link. That is a significant distinction worth sitting with. And here's what most people miss about processed meat. It also carries an invisible sodium burden that accumulates in deeply damaging ways. A single serving of deli turkey can contain 700 or 800 milligrams of sodium. The average person eating a modern diet consumes 2 to 3 times the recommended limit daily, and most of that excess is not coming from the salt shaker on the table. It is coming from the sodium embedded in processed and packaged foods as a preservative, a flavor enhancer, and a texture modifier. That chronic sodium excess stiffens arterial walls, forces the heart to work harder, taxes kidney function over years, and over decades creates the structural conditions for cardiovascular events that people experience as sudden but were never actually sudden at all. The fifth category is artificial additives, specifically emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and synthetic preservatives. This is the category people dismiss most quickly because the quantities in any single product seem small. A little carrageenan in your almond milk, a little polysorbate 80 in your salad dressing, a little aspartame in your diet soda. The food industry will tell you that each of these has been evaluated and approved within acceptable dose limits. What they will not tell you is that those evaluations were conducted in isolation on individual compounds over short time periods and almost never with meaningful attention to what these substances do to the gut microbiome. Because here is the deeper truth that changes everything. Your gut is not simply a digestive tube. It is a living ecosystem of roughly 40 trillion microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, archaea, viruses, that perform functions so broad and so fundamental that scientists are only beginning to map them fully. This ecosystem regulates immune function. It produces the majority of your serotonin. It manufactures B vitamins. It communicates directly with your brain through the vagus nerve in what researchers now call the gut-brain axis. The diversity and composition of that microbiome determines, in ways that are increasingly well documented, how your immune system responds to threats, how your mood stabilizes day to day, how your brain ages over the course of a lifetime. Emulsifiers like carrageenan and polysorbate 80 have been shown in multiple studies to degrade the protective mucus layer of the gut lining and disrupt microbial diversity in ways that promote chronic low-grade intestinal inflammation. Artificial sweeteners, despite containing no calories, alter the composition of gut bacteria in ways that impair glucose metabolism, meaning they may actively contribute to the insulin resistance they were marketed to help people avoid. The irony is cruel. The practical consequence is real. The application of all of this is not that you need to be perfect or afraid. I have lived 86 years, and fear has never been part of how I thought about food. What has guided me is something simpler: respect for what my biology actually is and what it was actually built to process. Every time you choose to cook a meal with whole ingredients, you are sending your body clean information. Every time you select butter or olive oil over a seed oil, your cell membranes literally rebuild themselves with more stable material. Every time you choose an unprocessed food over a packaged one, you are removing a dose of something your body has no evolutionary mechanism to handle gracefully. The deepest principle underneath all of this, the one that explains every category I have described, is this: the closer a food is to the form in which it came from the earth, the more your body knows precisely what to do with it. Not because old is always better, because your biology was written over millions of years of exposure to whole, real, unprocessed food, and no amount of laboratory engineering has produced anything your cells manage more fluently than the original materials. Eat what your body recognizes. Limit what it has to fight. Give your systems clean information consistently over time. That is not a diet. It is not a trend. It is simply the act of working with your biology rather than quietly against it. And if you do that with intention, your body will work for you for a very long time.